Hi everyone, I'm Jeff Dunmire from Casio and I'm here at Bees Music here in Mount Pleasant, Michigan. Beautiful day. And we're going to talk a little bit about the new keyboard from Casio called the XW-P1. This is a hybrid synthesizer that was pretty well designed with a lot of different components that you can utilize. It can be a lot of different things to a lot of people. When I first talk about it, we'll talk about the solo synth section, then we'll go to the hex layer section. There's also a drawbar organ section here, and then in addition to that we have PCM sounds. Also there's a step sequencer, a 16-step sequencer with 13 actual tracks in it. And there's also, if you look over here, you've got a phrase sequencer and then also arpeggio. So let's just get to it. First thing I'm going to show you is the solo synth section. Now this is made up of this can be made up of 6 different oscillators or oscillator sources where you can get your sounds from. You have two virtual oscillators, you have 2 PCM oscillators, and then you have a noise generator, and then you also have another sound that you can bring in from let's say any other source, like let's say if you have in this little section right here. You can put an iPad here, and if you're using something like Animoog or something directly from that, you can run it into the instrument end, and then you have the ability to shape it with the parameters, the same parameters that you use to shape the internal sounds. So here's a couple of the sounds from it. This is made up of 6 different components. So if we go over here, these are all our drawbars, but in this case we're going to use them as faders for the sounds. Each one of these 6 different sounds that I can use has faders attached to it. So here's my first oscillator. Here's my other one. My noise generator. This 5th one here is not working right now, just simply because we don't have anything plugged into it. So here's my noise generator. The noise generator also offers sample and hold. And again, just going back to the actual sound itself, you also have some knobs up here that are signable. And what you can do with the knobs, in this case they default to turn off, attack, and also release time. Also there's portamento on each one of the oscillators, and you can determine whether or not you want it on. Each oscillator also you have control of whether you have attack, decay, release time, LFOs. So there's a lot of cool things you can do with it. And I'll just play you some of the sounds. Next one. Also on the left here, you notice we have added in addition to the pitch bend, we also have a mod wheel here. So it's right here within reach, all right? In addition, since all we have is a 61-note keyboard, we decided to put the octave switch right here, right beside the keyboard, so you can actually just touch it while you're playing. About 3 steps up and down. In addition to the sounds you're hearing, there's also a lot of waveforms in there that came from the CZ, one of our very old vintage synthesizers that we used to use. And there's stuff from ARP. There's which is another older synthesizer company, but again, well known for the type of waveforms that it used to generate. Prophet, there's Oberheim, there's some JP stuff in there from Roland. So there's a lot of things that you'll be able to utilize. And it'll sound familiar because it sounds so much like other units that are out there. But again, keep in mind This is the solo part of it, so you're only playing monophonic. There's some other great bass sounds in here too that you can utilize. The great thing about it, also you can put your sounds on legato, or you can have them key on every time you hit the key. All right, so that's essentially this. I can go through some more sounds for you, but essentially there's a lot of stuff in there for you to play with. Next thing I want to go to is the drawbar organ. Drawbar organ is a little different than it is on some of our other units that contain drawbars. Essentially, what you have is you have 9 steps here on each one of these drawbars, as opposed to the 4 on some of the other units we have. So your sound is extremely smooth when you move the drawbars. There's none of that as you move the drawbars. But in addition, I've also got my percussion here. So I've got your high percussion, which normally is like 2 2/3. I've also got 4. And here's your Leslie, or your rotating speaker. We also allowed you to access the rotary speaker through the pedal, and I don't have it on. I'm not doing it in this particular mode, but I have it in what they call performance mode, which I'll explain a little bit later. There are a number of drawbar organ sounds in here. All you have to do is either use the no or yes button, or use the dial. Sometimes what I like to do is I like to take one of the drawbar organs and I like to combine it with one of the PCM organs. There are probably about 15 different PCM organs that you can utilize. And what I'll do is I'll detune them a little bit, and it'll give me a big chorusy sound, and then I can also still use my rotary speaker with it. So let me find them very quickly here for you. Access your drawbars. There's another one. Alright, next thing we're going to go to is the PCM section. There's 400 different programs in here, and a lot of them are based on, piano. They're all your meat and potato sounds you need when you're playing. So you've got pianos, organs, electric pianos, strings, brass, flutes, drums, synth sounds. A lot of stuff in there. I'm just going to play a few for you. We'll start with the pianos. Switches here. If I move up a little bit, I've got several different types of pianos. And rock piano, which really cuts through in a groove. And then we move up a little further, we're getting into some of your electronic pianos. your FM stuff. And we also have 60s, you know, like the old Wurlitzer stuff. And pretty much all your other sounds that you need as far as clav sounds, harpsichords, tremolo pianos. If we move over to this one, this says strings and brass on this particular button. So now I've got different string patches. More. Some brass stuff, vocals. Let's do a few vocals first. We got Oz. Strings and voice together. And then we get into some of the orchestra hits. I use those in a couple of things. Pizzicato strings are in there, temps. And then we get up a little further, you get into some trumpets. Muted trumpets. And then some nice synth brass. And also just a brass section, like from an orchestra. Where are you? This is called Dead Air Time. And all your reed sounds, tenor sounds. Flutes and bassoons and everything that you need in the orchestra. Some guitar sounds, you've got some nylon strings. Or if you want something a little mellower. Jazz guitar is surprisingly good. Steel string. And again, there's clean guitars and there are clean electrics, some distorted stuff. Move up a little bit further, you've got basses. Ride bass. In addition to that, you've got some synth bass. So a lot of different things you can utilize. Alright, and over in this section you've got your synths. Anything from voices to leads to nice pad sounds, everything's in there. And then on this final one called Various, you've got other warm pads and things that you need. But you also have some world instruments like sitars. And then further on you get into some of your general MIDI sounds and also sound effects, and also some drums. Now, one of the coolest things I think about this instrument is the hex layer. I haven't really spoken about it yet, but you can take all these PCM sounds and you can put them together in the hex layer, and this is something unheard of from Casio. It's very important point. So the thing is, what happens with this, you can put any one of these 6 layers across the keyboard, map them out anywhere you want. They can be overlapping, they can be just on top of each other, they can be split, some of them can be split, some of them can be layered. You can also bring them in with velocity sensitivity, so the harder you hit the keyboard, maybe you've got timpani and brass and strings, and you want the timpani to come in when you hit it the hardest, you can do that. When you want the brass to come in, maybe it's a little less hard than the timpani, but strings are nice, and when you play nice and legato, you get the strings. So cool thing about it, very expressive and unheard of for Casio. Normally what happens, if you look at our WK series or even our CTK series, we have 3 layers available on the keyboard. You have 2 on the top layers, and then you have a split on the bottom, and never the twain, or none of them will cross. All right. With this, you have all this ability to make these changes. So I'm going to show you a few things that I've done just on my own here. I've got this is a little chamber string orchestra. Another one with, this is just a nice little orchestral sound. Punch a little harder, I get some brass. A little bit harder, I get a timpani, so. Something with choir, okay? I wanted to do a Mozart thing. Again, just to show the power of this. There's something where I put some pipe organ, okay? So I play softly, I just have strings, it's real nice. And then the organ comes in, it's very powerful. More orchestral things. I'll get into the synth stuff too, and I figure everybody's going to be doing synth programs, so I wanted to focus a little bit more on orchestral things, just simply because it's what I'm interested in. Okay, but the other thing is, I think it would be it'd be nice to show people the power of this instrument. I think nothing really does it better than showing huge orchestral sounds. All right, so this one happens to be. This one has some bells, okay, but it's still got the timpani and the brass and stuff, but the high bells, like a glockenspiel almost, come in at a certain velocity. So if I play soft, just a couple more orchestral things. This is just, I wanted to put a string thing together. So I got several different string sounds in here, and again, they come in with different velocities. And I wanted to make it so that you could hear the lower registers where there's movement going on. This is just organs, and I made this kind of like for a pipe organist. You can start with, well, here's the whole thing by itself. But you can color things in. So let's just make it so that, make sure everything's down. So this is my master volume for the organ, or for all 6 of these. So let's bring in one sound. These are my fundamentals. So again, nice big sound. This is from a Tchaikovsky thing. This is Dance of the Reed Flutes. Basically what I did here is I've got a harp and a string on the bottom and then a couple of flutes on the top. One flute only comes in at a certain velocity, and I detuned it slightly from the other flute, and so you get kind of a flute section. So. Another thing, just real quick, a couple more. This is just using that orchestra hit you heard earlier. What I did was I put some timpani with it, a couple of strings. This is a work in progress, but just gives you an idea. So next time I do a video here, it'll be done. All right. This next one is just kind of a upper ranks. Another pipe organ thing. Alright, now let's go to some synth sounds. Those are down in the program section. And again, talking about the synth, you know, the fact that you have hex layers on here, I can have all these big synth sounds piled on top of each other, and it's pretty cool. So. What happens here is, again, I still have control over those sounds, each one of those oscillators. The knobs change a little bit. What happens now is I've got same thing with this, cut off. On this I've got detune. Over here I've got attack. And of course release. Other ones in there. And some other things using the hex velocity, you know, some of the velocity I was talking about where you could bring things in, the harder you play or the softer you play. hi-hat sounds with excuse me, some synth brass on the top. Alright, so that's the hex layer section. Now, next thing we got is the sequencer, the step sequencer. This is pretty cool. And to get to it, we'll just go to the step sequencer button right here, okay? And the first thing on there that's listed, program number 00, is the electro pop. And essentially what happens is I just hit start and stop. I'm going to change the tempo, I can tap it. What's going on here is sequencer is sequencer can do 9 different music tracks, and then in addition to that, 4 different controller tracks. So you're hearing just part of that. But you see these buttons across the bottom. Yeah, they when I was in another mode, they did something else. Right now, what happens with each one of these sequences, I have variations on the sequences with these patterns. So now if I hit this button here. We'll go to another one. Now if I want to go to another sequence, I just simply go up to, right now it's on electro pop, so let's go up to minimal house. Synth pop. Now a lot of these are focused on dance music and some hip hop stuff, but there's also some rhythm and blues things in here, some jazz. Let me find it. If you wanted to transpose, all you have to do is hit the key shift button, which is also the rotary speaker button, and now you can transpose from here to here. Now, how do you build a sequence? It's real easy, right? First off, you go to one of the user banks, right? And we're going to just pick Untitled, and essentially I'm going to hit the start and stop button. And I don't know if you can see it from the camera, but we see this little blue lights happening here. Now the first sound in here is drum 1, which is usually the kick drum, but it doesn't have to necessarily be like that. Essentially, there's no rules on this as far as the sequencing. You can take any one of those drum tracks and assign them to an instrument track, but just keep it simple. For me, we're gonna use the bass drum. So essentially, here it comes. There's my first beat. Okay. Now here's another one. All right. Sounds okay to me. Now I'm going to go to the next part, and to get to these different parts, whether you're in the sequence or whether you're in the solo synth section when you're trying to add layers or do stuff with layers, or even in the hex section, you'll use these plus and minus buttons right here. They'll probably be the most used buttons on here when you buy this, all right? So right now we're going to go to drum 2, which is a snare drum in this case. So I'm going to put a snare. All right, so there's my snare. Now, next thing is going to be a hi-hat. So we're just going to put a hi-hat, real simple beat. Now, the other cool thing about this is I can change some stuff around using the sliders, okay? If I, number 1, I have to hit the step sequence button. If you notice, there's I don't know if you can tell, but there's a blue light right there, all right? So what happens is now I can make some changes using the sliders. I can change accents, I can change beats, and so on and so forth. I can even add other hi-hat symbols in there. So this button to go back and forth between the top row and the bottom row. So now I'm on the top row. Alright, so now let's go to the next one. It's going to be a tom. Alright, and then we can make it a high tom and a low tom. Okay? Now we're going to put in a ride cymbal. But I can also change that to a crash. Or a splash. Whatever I want to take. Now I know this is a little busy, but I'm just trying to show you what it does. Now the next thing we're going to put in is a bass. So we're going to hard plus button again. Right now, I can also change pitches using this with the bass. So. If you don't want to be quite as freewheeling as that, you can also input them from the keyboard, okay? So, next one, this is one of my solo instruments. Another solo. You can always just run your finger across there and make another change and then add it again. Now the next thing I'm going to add is my chords, alright? So I got a plus again, and I'm just going to hit this button, and I'll hit this button, and now if you want to tie those together, now I can make it a whole chord. Now, again, if I want to... Okay, that's enough of that, all right? Now, the thing about it is, if you like what you just did, then you can take that same let's say drum pattern, and you can save it to the next button here, and then let's say you want to add something to it or subtract from it, you could. But the thing is, you can copy that pattern all the way across and then make whatever changes you want to it, all right? So it's, again, very intuitive, a lot of fun. But the thing about it is now, I also have this phrase sequencer, and I also have the arpeggio built in here. Now the arpeggio, there's 100 arpeggios in there, but there's also, and they're programmed, but there's also 100 user ones, and you can do your own arpeggios too, which is very, very slick. Alright, the phrase sequencer is 1600 notes tops, but there's a lot of neat little things you can do with that. And I want to show you what you can do when you bring it all together. And you bring everything together in the performance mode, right? So what happens with the performance mode is you can tie in your sequence, your arpeggios, your phrase sequencing, your hex pickups. If you want to use, if you want to use your PCMs with a solo synth or whatever, you can do that. So what I've done is I've done a couple of things here, just to kind of show what it does. This is my Toto impersonation, right? And what I did was I just grabbed a drum track from the drum sequencer, and I decided to use that with Africa. And for my phrase sequencing, that little da 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 da. Anyway, I've assigned that to that, and we'll just play it. Something else, I've got, this is flute arpeggios. One thing about the arpeggio that's different from some of the other units we've had, in my performance mode, I can just assign this to one part of the performance. Keep in mind, with the performance mode, you can have a hex layer, okay, or a solo synth layer, or a drawbar layer. You can have one of those three, but then you can have three other layers from the PCM sound. And so if you're using a hex layer, and then you're also using some PCM sounds. You've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, nine different things going on with layers, right? And so what I decided to do with these arpeggios is I just put them on the flutes. So I could have them all on 4 of them, or 3 out of the 4, or 2 out of the 4, or whatever, but I've just got them on 1. So I was trying to just create a kind of a really unique sound. Okay, so now let's talk a little bit about the unit itself, right? Number 1, it weighs 11 pounds, all right? Number 2, on the back there's MIDI and there's also USB, and they work independently of each other. So if you want, you can have the MIDI section going to another module, either controlling it or this being controlled by another keyboard. In addition to this, you've got the USB, which you can use for your iPad or your computer. If it's an iPad, you can just set it right here, or your iPod, or your iPhone. It's kind of cool, because what happens is you can just run this directly into USB, and then if you want, you can run this into the instrument in, and you have all your sound sources coming from this, all right? The other great thing about it, which has saved me a couple times on the road because I'm so forgetful, because a lot of times I'll leave my power supply in stores, okay, and then I realize it 2 hours later when I'm down the road. Anyway, this runs on batteries, okay, so you got 6 D-cell batteries, and that's a wonderful thing, let me tell you, all right? As far as on the back too, you've also got a sustain foot switch, and it's assignable. Like I said, you heard it for the sustain, but you also heard it for fast and slow on the rotating speaker. And that's pretty much it. I mean, this is going to be a phenomenal keyboard. I think as time goes on, people are going to be doing more and more, not only maybe some of the stuff that I did with the orchestral, but also with the synth section. There's a lot of cool things in the synthesizer part, and then using the step sequences and also the arpeggios along with it. I think you're pretty much going to just be limited by your own limits on your creativity, right? So that's my presentation. Hope you enjoyed it. Again, I'm in Mount Pleasant, Bees Music. Come down, they know what they're doing. All right, thank you.